It's been about a year since we've gone over the 10 stages of genocide as listed by the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust based on the research by Dr. Gregory H. Stanton, and I think it's time for a revisit. We're hanging out with chat right now, so if you're seeing this in the future, YouTube, what's up? Right now, we just decided, it's been a while since we've gone over this, and I had a previous video where I pulled examples and substantiated each step, and I think that there are more examples now of the more intense steps later on in the stages of genocide. So let's just look at this thing and I'll show you what it is that we're going to be discussing. 10 stages of genocide. This is not linear, by the way. Oh, I guess so. For a second, I just want to be clear before I get too far into this that genocide does not mean complete killing of the entire group of people, and it also doesn't mean successfully killing all the people. When Native American children were stolen from their parents and forced to go to boarding schools, and their hair was forcibly cut, and they were forced to learn English, and they had their religion taken away from them, that was also genocide. Even if huge swaths of those children hadn't died, which they did, even if they hadn't died, that on its own is genocide. Like stealing children from the group, trying to make it like so that there aren't more members of the group. If you are making an active attempt to reduce numbers of membership within the group, then that is genocide. And I also want to say before we get too far in this that this is specifically talking about a genocide against transgender people in the United States now. But some people will say that, oh, you're not a legitimate group because the UN's definition of genocide doesn't include gender or sexual orientation. Well, it includes religion, and a more updated definition also includes other types of political groups. So it does not just refer to like race or something like that. Genocides can be perpetrated against groups of people that have something in common that makes them unique, right? And they're usually an underserved group, a marginalized group, someone who it's easy to scapegoat. So I just wanted to get those things out of the way, that we're talking about an attempt to reduce numbers of the group. It also includes creating unlivable conditions for the group. So if you force people to live in squalor and then they catch a disease, and then a bunch of people die from like typhus or whatever, like Anne Frank died of like a fever, right? Creating conditions under which people die in an attempt to reduce numbers. Yeah, so like that also qualifies as genocide, okay? So before we get into this, I want you to understand that the thing that's happening is an attempt to reduce numbers of trans people, and that they are succeeding at that, creating unlivable conditions. If we can't access healthcare, they know that that increases the likelihood that people will kill themselves. That's genocide. And like weaponizing the populace against people is genocide. Like, let's get into it. So some of these things seem very innocuous, especially at the beginning, and that these are not necessarily, I guess, on their own proof of genocide. It's about this being a pattern of behavior that is increasing in intensity. So these don't necessarily have to happen in a linear order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it's just describing the intensity of the situation. So we start with classification, number 1. The differences between people are not respected. There's a division of us and them, which can be carried out using stereotypes or excluding people who are perceived to be different. We've been in this stage in America my entire life with regards to trans people being used as the butt of a joke in film and TV. Like I said, this is, early stage stuff, and it's when it fits into the broader picture that it becomes a really serious problem. Because what we begin to have here is a dehumanization, because, oh, you're different from me, you are a stereotype, you don't have, legitimate thoughts and feelings. It's easier to discard people who you think of this way, right? So that's where this begins. I could cite a number of examples, like, I don't know, Ace Ventura, of, trans people being used as the butt of a joke. It's quite common. Symbolization. This is a visual manifestation of hatred. Jews in Nazi-occupied Germany were forced to wear the yellow Star of David. In Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge forced people from the eastern zone to wear blue scarves. And from 1992, in northwest Bosnia, all non-Serbian citizens were forced to wear white armbands. I don't think I'm going to be able to find a link for this because the keywords are just so muddled up and there's so many possible search results, but on the subject of marking someone as trans, there have been attempts to pass laws that, include a section on your birth certificate for your sex and a separate section for your gender, and the gender marker is changeable, but the sex marker isn't. So that's one attempt to mark you as trans. Successfully, what they have done is, in a number of states, made it very difficult for you to change your gender marker. In Kansas, they just passed a law that was supposed to be an anti-trans bathroom bill, but what it did in effect was make it so that you can't change your gender marker on your driver's license or your birth certificate, and they are also going to retroactively change that. And so what that means, and people don't understand why that's so dangerous, is that no matter what you look like, let's say you're a beautiful transgender woman, you started hormones when you were quite young, you don't like look at all like you're trans, just not at all, and suddenly your identification says male, and you try to get a job, and you get denied that job because you're trans, because it's also not like illegal to do that in a lot of places, or it's really hard to prove even in places where it is illegal to do that. Or you try to find a place to live, and you get denied a place to live because your ID says male. And now you're homeless and you can't get a job, and that means you're going to have to use services from the government, and you're going to be in unsafe situations. You could die from starvation or exposure. Like, that's a death sentence. Or you could get into an interaction with a police officer where, you know, they see that your ID says male, and now they're gonna like rape you, because some police officers do fucked up shit like that. Anytime that there is you're not allowed to change your ID, or they make it hard for you to change your ID, some places, and this is like you know, speaking of genocide, just they make it so that you are forced to sterilize yourself. Like, you must have had bottom surgery in some places in order to change your gender marker at all. So that is clearly, you know, trying to reduce membership of the group by preventing you from reproducing, at the same time as it is symbolization, making sure that you look like, make sure that you are identifiable as trans. I would also make the argument, and some people might consider this a stretch, but if you know that giving people access to puberty blockers and appropriate hormone therapy as teenagers means that they are better able to assimilate and look cisgender as adults, if you try to prevent that from happening, then what you are doing, and whether, I don't know, it's hard to say how intentional this is, but then you look trans later, and then it's easy to discriminate against you whether or not you change your ID because you look trans, okay? In my opinion, that's all part of symbolization. There are numerous examples on each one of these, so if I take a little while to go through them, I apologize. It might take a little bit because, like I said, you know, there are just numerous different ways that these things happen, and they're quite a lot of them are very indirect, which is why it's so easy to view, especially these first couple stages, as being like, oh, that's sort of innocuous. Like, oh, you know, we need to have accurate identification of your sex assigned at birth, blah, 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 no matter how that affects you in your actual life, you know. Like, people don't really understand how big of a deal this is. So I'm trying to explain the number of ways in which this increases the danger and everything. So then we move on to discrimination. The dominant group denies civil rights or even citizenship to identified groups. The 1935 Nuremberg laws stripped Jews of their German citizenship and made it illegal for them to do many jobs or to marry German non-Jews. So discrimination obviously can happen in a number of different ways. If you are, you know, actually just now, the Supreme Court just ruled right at the end of June that it is legal to discriminate against gay people specifically if you provide a public service. Like, I think the case was a woman who allegedly builds wedding websites, like wedding announcement websites. She successfully sued to basically like be allowed to discriminate. It was fake, by the way. She would like literally made up the business. She had never like built any websites for anyone. They made the business specifically for the purpose of doing this lawsuit, and they got it all the way to the Supreme Court. And now it's legal for, you know, someone who bakes cakes to not bake a cake for your gay wedding. That's now legal. So discrimination, like, the laws are now changing. Recently, it's like they've gone waffled back and forth on it. But like the fact is that they are trying to restrict our access to things. It's discrimination to prevent trans kids from having puberty blockers, but to allow cis kids to have puberty blockers. It's discrimination to do that. And we're working through that in the courts right now. But objectively, that's what that is. Like, the dominant group is denying civil rights or even citizenship to identified groups. Like, man, I hadn't even considered what might happen if my citizenship was threatened here. But yeah, like, I'm not allowed to use the bathroom anymore. That's something that we talked about several times on this show before, is that I live in Kansas, and there's like, I don't have the right to use the bathroom of my choosing anymore, and I did used to have the right for that. So discrimination is, again, it's ubiquitous. It happens a lot of different kinds of ways, both large and small, and to different degrees in different parts of the country. Then we have dehumanization. Those perceived as different are treated with no form of human rights or personal dignity. During the genocide in Rwanda, for example, Tutsis were referred to as cockroaches. The Nazis referred to Jews as vermin. We have seen a huge increase in dehumanization over the past year, especially, where the groomer rhetoric is amping up, calling people groomers and pedophiles. And I've increasingly seen, Dylan Mulvaney, such a sweetheart, such a beautiful soul, being called it very aggressively. It is disgusting. This quite dehumanizing language that, like I said, that fits back in with classification. When you create an us versus them, when you think of people using stereotypes, that is the beginning of dehumanization. And then it becomes quite active. When you're saying, your experiences are so alien to my idea of what it is like to be human that you're delusional. Like, frankly, I think that calling trans people delusional is another dehumanization tactic, because, it's used to scourge us. If you were to, if you actually thought that trans people were delusional, then what you should want for them to have is, compassionate care that resolves their distress. And the solution to that problem is to give them transition-related care. Therapy can help with a lot of issues, but it doesn't fundamentally solve the issue of your body incongruence, right? And demons and imps. We had that one lawmaker in Florida call us mutants and demons and imps. They literally are using dehumanizing language, but the groomer thing is just much easier to point to. It's everywhere. The groomer rhetoric, it's all over the place. They're out there calling Target groomers for simply having rainbow products in their stores. It is dangerous. This rhetoric, this dehumanizing rhetoric, is super dangerous. IDK, I don't know about the US, but in France, we often hear mainstream media talking about a trans epidemic, which is complete dehumanization as well, right? Yeah, the whole, this is a contagion, this is a social contagion, they're trying to steal your children. I guess that all sort of fits into dehumanization. Calling them Satanists, imps, what do politicians think? This is D&D, oh my god, true. Yeah, so the idea that there's a trans epidemic, that's literal Nazi rhetoric. We've gone over it on stream before, and I want to just point out really quick that this page on Wikipedia is quite long and extensive, but if you're interested, I would really highly recommend reading on the persecution of homosexuals in Nazi Germany, because one of the things that they did was talk about how they thought that being gay was a social contagion. And they gave the death penalty to gay men. The pink triangle, you're familiar with the pink triangle symbol? That is the gay thing, the trans thing as well. Transvestites, as they called them, or transsexuals, or whatever you would say, they were also given the pink triangle during the Holocaust, during the same Holocaust as the other one. The one that you think about when you think Holocaust, you think Jewish people. But there was also gay men, any trans people, Roma people, disabled folks. These were all people who got genocided during the actual genocide. So please, if you were considering leaving a comment about how it's so disrespectful to refer to the Holocaust in this conversation, or it's so disrespectful to call this a genocide after what happened to Jews, the same thing happened to trans people, except it was still illegal to be gay or trans in several of the countries who came in and freed the people from the camps. That they were re-jailed afterwards. Denying that queer people were attacked and killed during the Holocaust is actually also it's also stage 10 denial. That's stage 10. So yeah, I just want to say the idea that gay people are recruiting, that's all literal Nazi rhetoric. That's all literal Nazi shit. If you go through and read peak persecution, they tried to police their own little militia groups to make sure there was no homosexuality occurring. The same rhetoric, the identical, it's a social contagion, they're groomers, it's the same shit. Nazi views of homosexuality. Yeah, they were influenced by earlier ideas which conflated homosexuality, child molestation, and, quote, the seduction of youth. Before the Nazis' rise to power, there was a widespread belief among Germans that homosexuality is not inborn, but instead could be acquired and spread. So when people use the groomer rhetoric and everything, it's not only dehumanizing, it's literal Nazi shit. Literal Nazi shit. Organization. Genocides are always planned. Regimes of hatred often train those who go on to carry out the destruction of a people. The Sudanese government supports and arms the Janjaweed Arab militia in Darfur to carry out the violence and killings. Proud Boys. Militia groups. Like, this is actively going on now. And the organization thing, this is, organization and polarization kind of fit in together, because polarization is propaganda begins to be spread by hate groups. The Nazis used the newspaper Der Stürmer to spread and incite messages of hate about Jewish people. These kind of go hand in hand, because what you have is the news media and politicians whipping up rhetoric, calling us groomers, you know, saying that drag queens are pedophiles and that, like, drag is inherently harmful to children. That results in people who are unofficial. Like, this is where the violence against trans people and whoever else, the violence gets normalized on an interpersonal level, where you have folks throwing Molotov cocktails and bricks through the windows of literal bakeries who are just doing a little drag brunch show, like a little fun, just playing dress up. That's all drag is. It's playing dress up, and you can make it appropriate for kids. You can have, like, a harsh, like, adult comedy show, just like you can have a kid-friendly comedy show, and the same is true with drag. Like, it depends on the situation. You can have sexy drag, but for the most part, it's like lip syncing or a comedy show or maybe dancing a little bit. It's not a striptease. That's a different thing. But yeah, so you can drum up that hatred about it, and that results in these two feeding back and forth against each other. And then you can also do the propaganda of saying when trans people start showing up with guns to defend themselves, like, oh, then you can whip up hate about the trans people and them owning guns. And like Tucker Carlson has done that, has whipped up some fear about trans people organizing and having guns. We had like examples last summer in organization of there was a U-Haul that got pulled over, and they found out there was like a bunch of Proud Boys wearing body armor and carrying batons who they were on their way to a Pride Fest. We had an example just very recently that I posted on my channel of a school board meeting where violence broke out between a bunch of people who were all wearing the same t-shirt and pro-trans, pro-LGBT counter-protesters. Like, they are using violence and fear to terrorize us. We have had specific, like, mass shootings that have specifically targeted trans people. We have also had, in December of last year, a bunch of power stations in Moore County, North Carolina were shot up, and power was down for like weeks for some people because there was a drag show happening. We are fully at this stage. Fully at this. And that's like the Sturmabteilung. I can't remember if it's like, it's not the SS, it's the other one. But like, again, referring to this, like Nazi Germany, the SS would whip up citizens against these folks. And that's like a similar thing that's happening now. So when the Hirschfeld Institute was destroyed, the Hirschfeld Institute for Sexual Study was destroyed. That was a bunch of students that got whipped up, and they went and destroyed like all of the writings and research that had been done. SA? Okay, cool. All the writings and research that had been done on trans people. So again, that's like the thing that we're going through right now. The thing that we're going through right now has so many echoes to the actual Nazi shit happening. It's just that, like, Jews are a secondary thought, because that is present. Like, let me be totally clear that anti-Semitism is still present in modern day transphobia, because there is, like, you'll see TERFs say it, and it's fucking crazy that they do this, but it's true. They go, oh, you know, they're being funded. You know, not only is this a social contagion, but it's not coming from nowhere. It's they are coming for your children. Like, it's still fundamentally anti-Semitic, but at this time, you know, trans people are the main focus. Back then, trans people were like a side issue, but make no mistake, they'll come for trans people first, and then they will continue expanding that out, and they'll go to gay people next, and they will continue killing disabled people, and they'll continue killing black people, and they'll continue stealing children from Native American people. They will keep doing this. So, and like, yeah, polarization is just like the propaganda, the Daily Beast, people like Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh openly calling themselves fascist or like theocratic fascist or whatever the hell it is that Matt Walsh has on his Twitter profile. Like, Twitter, it could be argued that Twitter, after its fall, has finally become like a place where it's a polarizing propaganda, like normalizing of hate speech toward trans people. So then we have preparation. So like, I want you to understand that this is like, we've gone through all of this now. That was stage 6. So all of the, you know, even the more mild stuff, we can definitely substantiate that. We have examples that can substantiate all of these. I have the links, I have the past year of streams where we've talked about all this stuff, multiple examples of each one from multiple angles. And I want you to understand that stage 9 is extermination. Like, before we get through these next few, I want you to understand that like stage 10, that's not the part where we're killing people and that's when like the mass death happens. That's stage 9. Stage 10 is denial. So when I say that we're at stage 8, I want you to understand that that's the step immediately before death and extermination. So as we move forward, keep that in mind. So preparation. Perpetrators plan the genocide. They often use euphemisms such as the Nazis' phrase, quote, the final solution, to cloak their intentions. Acts of genocide are disguised as self-defense if there is an ongoing armed conflict or civil war, such as in Bosnia. I mean, I'll evoke Michael Knowles again. Michael Knowles said he wants to eliminate transgenderism from public life. He made it esoteric. You know, the final solution doesn't, it's not them explicitly saying we're going to kill these people. It's implied. It's, you know, because of the implication. And yeah, and they cloak this as self-defense, saying we need to protect the children. They are just accusing trans people of being groomers and drag queens of being groomers, because then they can position us as the aggressor. And like, there is nobody on this earth that people are more willing to be violent toward than child molesters and pedophiles. So if you associate trans people with pedophiles, then you're saying like, these people are the lowest of the low. They've done something unforgivable by harming children. And so literally any action we take against them is justified. That's the situation that we're in right now. When Arkansas tried to pass a law making it a like gross sexual offense to be in the bathroom at the same time as a child if you're trans, like they made it a crime at the same level as literally raping a child. Like being present in the bathroom. They tried to make that a sex crime equivalent of raping a child in Arkansas. A shoddily written law with like missing sentences. They have officially, this is where the rhetoric is. They're coming for your children. They want to destroy America. They make America look weak. Florida did pass that law. Florida's law does not make it a sex crime. It made it a trespassing crime. So it isn't as egregious in that way. It's the trans question's final solution. Yeah. Meanwhile, child marriage is being carried out like it's no big deal. Again, yeah, because they don't actually care about the values that they espouse. They espouse the value of not thinking it's okay to groom children, but what they actually want is to be able to groom children, sell their 12-year-old daughters off to their 60-year-old friends. And of course, we know that it's like priests who are the kind of people who are like raping children, and that like To Catch a Predator, the show To Catch a Predator was canceled after they uncovered a statesman, a representative, I can't remember if it was a senator or a representative in the House, but the show was canceled after that. They have been catching all kinds of folks, you know, uncles everywhere, but they don't really catch drag queens doing fucked up shit to children because they don't do fucked up shit to children, like, as a rule. The next stage is stage 8, which I believe it's very clear that we are in stage 8 right now. We've very clearly substantiated everything up to this, and I will tell you why. So persecution. Victims are identified because of their ethnicity or religion, and death lists are drawn up. People are sometimes segregated into ghettos, deported, or starved, and property is often expropriated. Genocidal massacres begin. So, like, this is where, like, death starts to happen here, but this is kind of like the squeeze. This is the squeeze. This is more like starving you out. This is more like indirectly killing you, expropriating your property. That means, like, you're not allowed to own it anymore. Like, if your home is repossessed for some illegitimate reason, then your property has been expropriated, right? So we have lists being drawn up. In Kansas, we have this bathroom law that passed, and additionally the last paragraph says you're not allowed to change your gender marker anymore, and they're retroactively revoking that. That means that the Attorney General has a list with my name on it on his desk already. Like last week, you know? Like we're gonna revoke all of, there's a record somewhere of all the trans people who have changed their gender marker ever, I guess. And they're collecting this data so that they can revoke retroactively. They need to have a list in order to change that. So yeah, death lists are being drawn up. In Florida and in Texas, they also tried to create lists of trans people. And then the death situation has already basically started, because if you deny people access to healthcare, we have had substantiated examples of teenagers attempting suicide and succeeding at suicide because of the laws passing, because they're having their access to healthcare taken away, because they don't have adequate support from their families. That's already happening. The death by attrition thing, that's already happening. The death by 1,000 cuts, it's already occurring. People are dying, and people, essentially, we're not being forcibly deported, but the fact is that, situation is so dangerous in so many parts of the country that there's over 100,000 trans people have already relocated in the past year. 100,000 people, I think it was 130. The lowest number is 130,000 trans people who are just gone. So being displaced, not being necessarily forcibly deported, but being displaced. Hunter Avalone's fans claimed this is fear-mongering. It's not fear-mongering if the danger is real. It would be fear-mongering if the danger weren't real, but we are dying already, and more people are going to die. That's the situation that we're in. Yeah, we have a link in the chat. Thank you, Bobs, for the Human Rights Campaign talking about the Texas trying to collect data on trans adults. Kansas has succeeded at that. They were blocked in Texas, if I recall. They did not end up successfully saying, yes, give me the list of trans people. As far as I know, in Kansas, we did it. If things get worse on the federal level, I'm moving to Germany. I mean, I think it's going to. It's harder for it to get worse on the federal level for certain reasons, but yeah, there's not going to be very many safe places. Silver lining is that a lot of states are trans sanctuaries. I mean, that's the first goal, I guess, is to get to a place that is a safe sanctuary state, and then from there, potentially be ready to leave the country. What the hell else are you supposed to do? But let's continue. Sorry, I got distracted. And then the next step is extermination. So I have substantiated all eight of these. I was able to substantiate all 7 of these last year when I covered this about 11 months ago. But yeah, extermination is the hate group murders their identified victims in a deliberate and systematic campaign of violence. Millions of lives have been destroyed or changed beyond recognition through genocide. This is the big thing. This is the big one. And then stage 10 is denial. The perpetrators or later generations deny the existence of any crime. Evidence is destroyed and witnesses are intimidated. There has been an increase in Holocaust denial online in recent years. Right. And again, calling back to the fact that most people don't know that transgender and gay people were killed during the genocide of the Holocaust, that's denial. That's denial. And that is also part of what makes it easier then. It's part of what makes it easier to perpetrate a second genocide. It's kind of hard to target Jews directly because of the mental association with the Holocaust. But if you just pretend you didn't do the same thing to trans people, then you can just do it again and people won't notice. People don't seem to be noticing. I don't mean to sound like a doomer, but I'd suggest not placing too much hope on those trans sanctuary states, at least not in the long term. I mean, yeah, basically, I would say get to, there's a concentrated number of trans people in certain places and other gay people. And if you're in a place that has decent gun laws so that you can have access to guns and plenty of your queer friends have those, that seems to be the move. And then, yeah, be prepared to leave the country. Cause it's gonna, it's so rapidly has gotten worse. And when Trump got put into office, I was really upset because I saw that this was potentially going to happen, and now it has. So I don't want to harp on too long at the end of this segment, because mostly I just wanted to go through and address all these points and show you like, I can substantiate all of these. We are at stage 8. My name is on a list. My name is on a list because I changed my legal sex back in 2016. Keep your passport up to date. Yeah, I'm for sure I'm going to get a passport. You should do that too. You should consider protecting yourself. You should consider leaving. You should consider doing whatever you have to do. And I don't mean this in a cute way. It's not a cute like, oh, just move. You know, if you're trans, you're a refugee. Sell everything you own. Like, that's the situation that you're in. Contact the rainbowpassage.org if you're interested in, like, either if you need out of a place that's unsafe, or if you want to volunteer to help people. If you're aware that this is happening and you're like, oh my God, how can I help? One thing that you should do is, first of all, consider supporting people's GoFundMes when they're moving out of places. Some people have to break their lease, which costs money. People need to, maybe if you're going to hire like a small U-Haul, that could be reasonable. Help people directly where you can, and sign up at rainbowpassage.org. They have a vetting process. So it's not like casual. It's very serious. They're finally starting their 501c3. So they're establishing as a nonprofit organization. They've already removed 6 people from Florida and Texas and moved them to safer places within the United States, and like helping them get on their way to moving further away if they need to. Volunteer. Whether you have an extra room, whether you have a spare couch, or whether you just have graphic design skills or like web building skills, they need volunteers to organize behind the scenes as well and help them figure out legal issues and, you know, all kinds of long-term plans that they have. It's a very small project, but if you understand the danger of the situation, that's what you need to do. You got to help. I wish it was called Rainbow Road. Yeah, Rainbow Road, like from Mario. Do what you can to protect yourself. Get pepper spray if you can. Get a taser if you can. Look up the laws about open carrying or concealed carrying tasers, and like, take this very seriously. And if you're an ally, you need to check in with people in your life and make sure that they're okay. Like, make sure that folks are okay, because we're probably not. And like, ask how you can help. You know, if someone needs help selling their car, like, help them sell their car. If someone needs help moving, help them move. Help them pack up their shit. If someone needs you to watch their cat for a few weeks while they're getting established in their new city that they're moving to, help them by watching their cat. Like, just like do everything you can to contribute. And I guess like keep voting or whatever. Like, I don't give a shit. Voting hasn't helped anything. It's not going to help anything. Don't stop doing it, but like, don't act like you're accomplishing anything, you know, by doing it. You need to actually accomplish something outside of voting in order to help. It's not perfect, but definitely not as bad as the US and the UK/Europe, but you could emigrate if that's possible for you. I don't even know that there are other safe countries either. It super depends on like the area. Like, I don't know. My opinion might be that it's safer to stay in a sanctuary state for the short term and like see how things develop. Because, you know, in Washington, where they have good Medicaid and good food stamps and like a lot of people who are there to protect you, like, to me, no country is truly safe, I think is fair. Canada is only a couple years behind us. They also, like, having access to like informed consent healthcare in a state like Washington or Oregon might be good. But yeah, like, I can't greenlight another country. You could go to New Zealand if you want, but if you need national healthcare, you know, like any trans related surgeries you get in New Zealand, you're gonna have to pay out of pocket for. It won't be covered by the state insurance. So like, yeah, it's maybe better, like safer interpersonally, probably safer as far as COVID's concerned, but you're just gonna have to weigh each place, y'all. You're just gonna have to weigh each place and come to your own decision and like decide. I can't tell you what to do. All I can tell you is that it's really unsafe here and that you need to protect yourself at whatever cost is required. I think I'm gonna go the dual citizenship route, and then if I have to run, it limits the US ability to limit me. Right, yeah. I like get your citizenship wherever else, just in case they revoke your citizenship here. I would need government help wherever I move. I can't work due to disabilities. I mean, that's the other tricky thing too. You can't, like, it's harder to emigrate as a disabled person because people don't want disabled folks in their country, you know? Thank you so much to my August supporters, including Tiago Nascimento, Mersh Rolvog, Amanda B, Danielle McDonald, Sarah A, Spooky Heather Sylvia, Robin Olson, Athiette, Kevin Young, Michelle Winter, Past Null Infinity, Jamie Jam, DZXN, Desi Quiche, Suzanne Maynard, Kitty Tick, Nova, Mr. Atheist, Elizabeth Bartell, Sojo, and Michelle Frateroli.